All right. What's up, everybody? This is episode 71 of Hoops Talk with Dave's Joint. Shout outs to everybody that's been showing us love thus far. Hope everybody's having a great Labor Day out here in the tri-state area and around the country. For those who haven't seen any of my content, go check it out on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV. But without further ado, we have a very special guest tonight. This man has been a Division I player and has trained some of the premier basketball players to come out of the tri-state area, and also some pros. So if you don't know him, you'll get to know him throughout however long we have on here.
The Clippers game comes on.
Today's guest is Mr. Daryl D. Train Smith. D, thank you for coming on to share your testimony.
My pleasure.
Indeed. So my very first question is, when did basketball first start for you?
Great question. Great question. Ironically, a little known fact that most I moved away from back and wide receiver, and I was getting hit in the knees a lot. But I would be playing baseball, and I would be playing I would get selected to all these all-star baseball tournaments, right? I'd be standing there, and all my friends would be going to the park, to play. And I'm like, man, baseball is a little bit playing against grown men in the park. So that's kind of how it really started.
So, where did you grow up at? And what was the basketball culture like in your city or town?
I grew up that. I was born in Pittsburgh when my dad was playing with the Steelers. Spent my time in Connecticut and Washington, D.C. Connecticut is not the Connecticut I grew up in. I used to play a lot in Bridgeport. In fact, my roommate at 5-star was Chris Smith, the UConn Huskies all-time leading scorer.
Yes.
And when we were at camp together, he would dribble the ball up the hill between his legs, right? Crossing over back between his legs, which later would be affectionately known as the Smitty Bop. But that was my roommate at 5-star. We actually played together, on the courts in Bridgeport. Another guy.
All right. So you were talking about Worcester Academy. What was it like there for the 2 or 3 years that you were there for?
Yeah, like I said, as I went, I was told by my coach, Tom Blackburn, that I wasn't really going to play a lot. And that just infuriated me because I was like, yo, this dude's never seen me play. And I went out as a junior and won MVP of the AA tournament, averaged 27 points a game. Probably had one of the best games of my career. 3 fouls in the first half, 2 points. Came back against St. Thomas More, dropped 28 in the second half, and we won. And to this day, God rest his soul, my dad still is like, man, he's like, I can't believe, when I saw that game, I was just like, yeah, I knew you were something special. So, that was good. And I just, going in the gym at Worcester and seeing all those college coaches, coming to Massachusetts just to watch me play, I was like, okay, this, might be on to something here. So great experience, great coach, Tom Blackburn, legacy of winning, obviously good academics, a chance to really be on my own and grow up as a man. And even when I went back for my Hall of Fame, enshrinement last year, it was like, man, I drove up there and I didn't need GPS. Everything just came back to me. You know what I mean? I knew exactly where to go, and walking in those same halls, I was like, man, I said in my speech, you never know how far you've gone until you go back to where you came. You know what I mean? So it was crazy. I'm standing there on the stage giving a speech, and I'm like, man, I dreamt about playing big time college basketball. I said I was going to do it. I went and did it. But never in my wildest dreams, you're telling me I'm gonna travel the world, I'm gonna get to hang out with LeBron and, work for Jordan, do all these things coach and train all these, top players. I would have never thought of that back then, but had it not been for that experience at Worcester, it would have never happened.
Shout outs to the Worcester Academy's graduating class of 1988. So, outside of Worcester, What were some of the tournaments that you enjoyed playing in as a youth?
Well, like I said before, my dad, when he used to get tired of me, he would take me to Queens and this park called O'Connell Park.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was just like, I mean, you're talking Queens in the 80s. Those who were old enough to know, like, Queens was a wild place back in the 80s. Like, and the games were just, 4 o'clock every day. We get to the court and we play till 9, 10 o'clock. I'm talking 7 days a week, and this was when, yeah, you had your Riverside and your Gauchos teams, but for the most part, the average person didn't really get that experience. It was like you had to go to your park and play. And I actually used to take great pride in just finding, going to different hoods and being like, yo, where's the comp? You know what I mean? And just showing up and, and I always play against grown men. I wouldn't play against kids my age. I would play against grown men. And I mean, there were times when, you dunk on the local legend, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, you got to make sure you know how to get out of the park, just in case. That's just the era of basketball. That's how it was back then. Like you go somewhere, everybody's at the court, you show up the best guy, sometimes people get in their feelings. But as a player, I would take great pride in that because ultimately you would earn their respect because, you wouldn't back down.
I hear that, man. So, talk about your recruitment in high school.
It was interesting. So, like I said, being at Worcester Academy, I got recruited by a lot of schools, and I never forget my dad kind of just saying to me, like, ask yourself if you want to be, a big fish in a small pond, or if you want to be a small fish in a big pond. And I was like, I want to go big time D1. But I did take the heat because obviously this wasn't the one and done era. So like 4 years was pretty much a given and a norm. And I remember like, watching NBA basketball, and there were two guys that I loved watching play, Roy Hinton and another guy, John Battle, who played with the Hawks, played with Dominique. And they always, John Battle, Rutgers, John Battle, Rutgers. And I remember living in DC, John Battle, you'd hear his name like all the time. And so I was like, Rutgers is a major metropolitan area. It's a big time school. And if I go, I won't necessarily have to wait. At the time they weren't very good. So I was like, if I go there, maybe I can get a chance to play early and play all 4 years. Lo and behold, they got rid of the coach that was there. And then the new coach came in and, we got a couple transfers from Syracuse. And within 2 years, like, we were a top 25 team. Playing on national TV, it was crazy. It was like everything, that I dreamt of. Going up against the best of the best competition, and holding my own. It was a great experience. So, I was a little different, and because my dad basically was like, make sure you pick the school, don't let the school pick you. At the end of the day, if basketball doesn't work out, you got to have something to fall back on. And not only that, the advice he gave me was, if you pick the school, know that the coach can leave, and make sure that you're solid with that decision because the coach isn't wedded to you. Now, people talk about that a lot more now. My dad was telling me back then, he was like, find out about the school and choose the school for the school, not the coach, because the coach could be there today, but he could end up leaving tomorrow.
That's true.
So that was sage advice. And so, Rutgers, to me, coming from a prep school in New England, I didn't really want to go to an obscure college, out in the middle of nowhere. I wanted to be a major metropolitan area. New York, I was used to coming to New York all the time. My dad was born in Harlem, grew up in Queens. So like that whole city vibe, I wanted to be close to that. I mean, when I was at Rutgers, I would hop on the train and be in Manhattan in, 40 minutes, like it was nothing. Because I've been doing that since I was a young kid. And like I said, I wanted to play at a big time program, play against big time schools, be on national TV. And so, Rutgers afforded that opportunity. If you go back and do the homework, I mean, we had some pretty, like I said, stellar teams, top 25 teams, had some battles, back in the day against Temple, UMass, when Cal was just coming up at UMass, like we used to thump them until Cal, got the recruiting thing going on. And then, they kind of took over. But you know, do your homework, do your research. Like we were a top 25 team back then, and you know, even shout out to Coach Peichel. He's kind of turned things around this year and got that fervor and frenzy back. I just remember, like I said, you know, when I was at Rutgers, you know, we had the place rocking. Like, you know, it was just like a buzz and an excitement because, you know, we were a winning program. So those were definitely some great times at Rutgers. Yeah. And a winner all 4 years. You know, all 4 years went to postseason. So that's something. And I tell kids all the time, like when I walk in gyms, I look up in the banners and they're like, well, why do you do that? And I said, because, you know, I know when I go back to the rack, I look up and I see those 4 banners that I helped put up there. I still get like a rush and a chill because I'm like, you know, when you think about all the blood, sweat, and tears you put in, but at the end of the day, those banners ain't coming down. You know what I mean? So you always can look up there and say, yo, like when people are like, oh, what'd you do, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, you could have the barbershop talk, or you could just say, yo, go to the gym and look up in the rafters and you'll see what I did. So that's, you know, that's how I feel about my experience.
Shout outs to the Rutgers University graduating class in 1992.
Yes, sir. Yes,
now,
sir.
You got to play in the NCAA tournament twice.
Correct.
The first time as a freshman and the second time as a junior.
Yes.
And then 2 NIT appearances in between. Like, talk about, you know, being on the postseason all 4 years, and what was it like for you to play in the big dance?
Well, it was interesting, right? So the first year, you know, as a freshman, I didn't really get to play a lot, you know, and that was really humbling. There was a guy named Tom Savage who played in front of me, and actually, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. I mentioned him a lot. He was 1 year ahead of me, but when I got there, he was just, I mean, he was that dude, man. He was like 6'5", 6'6", like 230, 240, you know, could go to the hole, could pull up, shoot, and you know, my coach, my freshman year, my assistant coaches were Jeff Van Gundy and Eddie Jordan. So, wow. Yeah, most people don't know that. So, I remember this guy, Tom Savage. I mean, he used to just send me to my room like in tears because I couldn't guard him. It was the first time in my life. I mean, you're talking about a guy, you know, I could dunk from the foul. I mean, like, I wasn't used to guys just taking advantage. Really helped me here. So I started playing defense and playing him physically and sticking him like glue. Gundy coached the white team, which was the scout team.
I go to the.
You there?
I'm here. I'm sorry. Sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties. But yeah, go on, D.
That's okay.
You were talking about John Savage and how, you know, how tough he was to guard you.
Yeah, Tom Savage. So Tom basically at the end of the year, you know, essentially gave me the ultimate. Makes it so tough for me. So actually, the games are easier. Mm-hmm. So based on that, that really gave me like a boost of confidence in terms of, you know, being a defensive stopper. And I took pride in that. So my freshman year going to the NCAA tournament, we actually played against Iowa and BJ Armstrong. So I was more of like a spectator, you know, and watched him drop, you know, 9 threes, I think he had against us. Wow. Our coaches were like, oh, well, they also had, so they had a big guy, Matt Bullard, that played in the NBA, and this other guy, Roy Marble, who was super athletic. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, the scouting report, they weren't like, you know, focusing on BJ, and we were sad. Next thing you know, he's playing with Mike. So that was an interesting experience. Then my junior year was a little different. You know, I was a starter. We went 19-9 that year, you know, top 25. We were expected to be top program. We were a top program. I always got the assignment of guarding the toughest man. Now the difference in the second time around, my junior year, we were number 8 seed. We were playing Arizona State. They had Isaac Austin, played the NBA for a long time. They had this other kid, Jamal Faulkner from New York City. The other kid, Stephen Headache Smith. But we actually had a 9-point lead with like 3 minutes to go, and it evaporated. And I think the combination of things, but ultimately we were looking past them because Arkansas was, if we won that game, we're going to play Arkansas, Todd Day, Lee Mayberry, and those guys. I think we just got caught looking past, Arizona State and looking forward to playing Arkansas in the next round. Ultimately we didn't hold our focus, and we lost. We ended up losing that game.
Well, I guess it's cool to say that you were part of the last team to have played at the last Rutgers team that played in the NCAA tournament.
It's bittersweet because anytime I'm like around there and I go down and I get stopped on the street and you know what I mean, people talk about, oh man, you look like you could still play this, that. And I mean, it's flattering, but at the same time, I'm like, damn, like it's been that long. Y'all can't get back to the tournament, really? But it's nice though to be remembered and to be appreciated and to go down as, one of the better teams, in Rutgers history. Obviously you have the undefeated team of 75, 76. And then you have the team with Roy Hinton and John Battle. They were really good as well. And then obviously our team is probably up there, I would say, probably as like, a number 3 team of all time. So, like I said, good experiences. Wish we could have done a little better, but can't take away those memories and can't take away those experiences.
Yeah. What was it like playing in the A-10 back then?
Oh, it was a war every night. It was a war every night. And it's funny, they talk about the home court of the RAC right now, but back then, I mean, I'll never forget, we played UNLV at home my senior year.
Wow.
They had J.R. Ryder, they had Dexter Boney, had this kid Elmore Smith, 7-footer, kid Everett Gray from the year before. I mean, they were stacked. We beat them at the RAC, and I'll never forget, I got a steal and went up, and I guess I shocked everybody because everyone thought I was going to lay it up, and I just cradled it and dunked it backwards on top of this kid. I actually have the poster in my man cave, but the crowd was so loud, like my ears were just, it was just ringing. It was crazy, and some of the excitement that they have now, we had that at every game. All our games were sold out. You know what I mean? Like all our games were sold out on TV. Like I'll never forget, one day I looked up in the stands and I'm looking at like Gregory Hines, the late Gregory Hines. I'm like, damn, Gregory Hines came to watch us play. Like, so it was, it was a who's who that always used to come down and watch us play. So it was great experiences playing in the A-10, playing against Temple, Mark Macon, Coach John Chaney. Like, yeah, we had, and then like I said, Cal was getting his start. We used to beat up on him early, but then when he started getting those recruits, they started winning, and obviously the rest is kind of history. Where it's always interesting going back to see where he launched from, and it's always nice when I see Cal now. He's all Mr. Big Kentucky, but I just kind of give him that look like, yeah, dude. When y'all played us, we used to give it to you. So it's kind of fun.
And what's funny is that year that you guys played UNLV at home, you guys were one of their 2 losses on the season.
They had one of the longest winning streaks in NCAA history, and we stopped it. Absolutely right. And what was funny, what I remember about that game is the year before they thumped us out there, right? That they had Augman, they had Anderson Hunt, Larry Johnson, Stacey Augman. But I'll never forget, like Tarkanian, basically I overheard the interview he was given for the game my senior year at Rutgers. And he was basically saying like, yeah, the kid Smith, because like the year before I had like, I think like 20 and 10 against the number 1 team, against Larry Johnson and those guys. So I just remember him being like, yeah, we got to stop that kid Smith. He really, was giving it to us last year. And just to hear like, a legend like Tark basically saying like, yeah, we got to stop this guy, it was kind of flattering. And then again, when that horn sounded and everybody went crazy, it was just like, damn, like we really beat UNLV. That was like, signature win for sure.
Yeah, man, that's a good memory right there. Because
Yes,
that was the same year. Well, the following year after they lost to Duke in the Final Four, And then basically Tark was on probation for that last year.
Yep.
They let him coach one final season at UNLV, and then that was that.
Right. Yeah, and I think he was 30-2 that year, and we were one of the 2 losses.
26-2.
26-2. Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay.
So after graduation, you went and played overseas. What was that like?
That was interesting because, no Facebook, no Instagram, no TikTok, so very isolated, calling cards. And, it's crazy because I still hear guys today telling the horror stories about not getting their money, getting bounced around from country to country. And, I did that for a couple of years and I just was like, man, it's a different world over here. It's kind of isolated. I really wasn't enjoying my experience. So I just kind of was like, maybe basketball is not kind of, what I want to do. Let me just take my degree and go put on a shirt and tie and, go try corporate America out, which ironically is kind of what spawned my next career because, I had success in corporate America, was doing really well for myself, but it wasn't the same, closing big deals were cool, but I didn't feel like I was having the same impact and I was missing the game. I think subconsciously I was trying to get away from basketball. And so immersing myself in corporate America was kind of like, the furthest I could get away from it. But ironically, and this probably leads to the next question, but what actually spurred me to start training people was one of my former mentors had a son. And one day I was visiting him and we were just in the driveway shooting around. And I kind of just, we were playing one-on-one. I just kind of was showing him a couple of things. And his dad, who happened to be also an All-American track runner, just kind of was like, yo, you showing him all this stuff. Like he plays AAU, he goes to all these camps and all these like basic things that you're teaching him. Like nobody's teaching him this stuff. And I was like, and then an idea kind of popped in my head. I was like, wow. So then he was like begging me to come back the next week and show some more stuff. And this guy lived like an hour and a half away. So I was like, all right, okay. The next week I showed up, there was like 5 or 6 kids like soaking up everything that I was teaching. But then the kind of light went off in my head and I was like, maybe this might be something, to consider. And at the time, like, the dot-com bubble was busting and there was just a lot of, I was in telecom and IT. There was a lot of change going on in that industry. And I was like thinking to myself, like, yeah, what can I do in the event that this doesn't work out? And I thought about a lot of things, but I was like, I'm just one of those people who, I'm not going to lie, I like money and nice things, but I can't do something. It's hard for me to do something just for money. Like there's got to be something in my spirit and something in my gut that makes me feel good. Now, don't get me wrong.
A certain type of incentive to do it.
Right. Don't get me wrong. Like, pay me, right?
Yeah.
Pay me. I'm not afraid or allergic to money, but I'm saying, it's hard for me to do something just because there's money involved. I think when you do it just because there's money involved, it's there's something disingenuous about that.
Exactly.
So ironically, I had a friend of mine, Coach Daryl House, who was a coach with the New York Liberty at the time. And he used to call me up and basically ask me to come work out the New York Liberty. We're talking like prime New York Liberty, like Teaspoon, Becky Hammond, Kim Hampton, like this was like when they was going to the finals every year. So I would like sneak over to Basketball City, over by the piers and like throw off my suit, put on my workout gear, and I would get a bunch of guys together and we would play against the women, and rough them up and get them ready for the season. But I'll never forget one time he called me in to do the Olympic team. The Olympic team was in town. And so ran with them, it was Cheryl Swoops and Mika Catchings and just the whole, like the whole crew, right? And the bug just caught me. I was like, yeah, this feels good. Then I just one day took a leap of faith and was like, you know what? I'm gonna step back from this corporate America stuff. And at the time, I was way ahead of the curve in terms of training and development. And so I started out literally my first client was the city of Newark. you know, and a school, Eastside High School in Newark. They had just, Randy Foy had just graduated. They had just won a state championship. And what's funny is I got a grant, and I went around to all the schools and asked them, hey, there's this grant that's been made available. I'm offering my services. Eastside was the only school that basically said yes. And then the funny thing was they were kicking everybody's butt, and they were like, "Yo, how come they get a trainer? Like, why do they get a trainer?" And I was like, I offered it to all you guys. None of you guys wanted to take advantage of it. So I did that for a few years, and then obviously started training people privately. And my reputation kind of kept growing. Then I met some folks at Nike who kind of caught wind what I was doing. I started doing some stuff with Nike. And then out of that, you know, Jordan somehow, you know, I got involved with them. Well, actually, I'll tell you a funny story is I was at Michael Jordan's birthday party down in Houston, Texas. And John Legend, a little known John Legend, was performing. All these celebrities are walking in. And so I just start striking up a conversation with the guy at the bar. And it turns out he was the digital manager for the company that hosted Jordan's website. And we had a long conversation. He was saying how, hey, you know, we're looking for, you know, we want to get into training. We're looking for some content and some videos. I was like, man, I got a ton of, you know, videos. This was when, like, you still had to embed videos on your webpage, right? Before MySpace and before, you know, Instagram and all this and YouTube. So I showed him some of my videos, and, like, you know, next thing you knew, I had a small contract with Jordan Brand. Then around the same time, I actually started working. I got a couple of kids from St. Patrick's High School. And in fact, there was a kid, Isma Bala, who was just coming off of a torn ACL. And I basically rehabbed him that summer, and he went on to win Most Outstanding Player of the TOC in New Jersey, and then got a full ride to LaSalle. And then based on what I was able to do with him, you know, word got to Kevin Boyle, and basically it was like, yo, we want you to do the whole team. And then before you know it, like, I was firmly entrenched over there. And I mean, as they say, the rest is history.
Now, yeah. So let's go way back into, all right, I don't want to get too far ahead. Okay. So now, what was it like, as far, like, because I'm reading your bio on Worcester's website, and it said that you were involved with a couple of Fortune 500 companies. Like, so talk about the companies that you worked for.
Yeah, so first job out of college was at Xerox. So I worked there, you know, and then another company was Gartner Group, Technology Market Research, and then eventually went into IT and telecom with, well, no longer, but MCI WorldCom was one of the largest companies in the world at one time, and obviously we all know what happened to them, so they went under. Yeah, I had a nice run in corporate America, but like I said, it wasn't, you know, I didn't get the same juice, you know what I mean, that I got from, you know, being in the gym and helping young people, and, you know, it was good. And I mean, I love technology, but obviously, you know, loving your job and having a passion, you know, if you're lucky enough, you can intertwine the two, but most people can't say that what they really, really love to do is what they also get paid to do. If you find that, you know what I mean, you're a lucky individual. Yeah. So that was those were my experiences with corporate America. And you know, like I said, when the .com bubble kind of burst, and, you know, all the companies, I think, you know, WorldCom, Enron, you know, there's a bunch of companies that were just like, you know, went from being the biggest companies in the world to basically just disappearing overnight.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. You know,
Yeah.
just to be a part of a big conglomerate that all of a sudden folds after a while, like, that has to be really sad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's but again, as Malcolm used to say, through with every great adversity, every great defeat, it builds character. You know what I mean? And when you have setbacks and when you have challenges, you're either gonna rise up and adapt or you're gonna perish. So I felt like I had no choice. I had to, you got to hustle. You got to figure something out. Perseverance.
Absolutely. So, you then mentioned, working with the Liberty and the Olympic team. Now, which Olympic team was that? Was it 2000 or
No,
2004?
it was 2004.
Okay.
2004. 2004. Yep. At Reebok gym.
Oh, you were involved with Reebok.
No, I wasn't involved with Reebok. That's just where they held the that's where we had the workout over at the Reebok gym.
Where was that?
That Reebok gym was right over there by Columbus Circle, not far from Columbus Circle. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, Reebok gym is like that's like a New York landmark. They used to have a lot of good runs at the Reebok gym. Yeah, a lot of good runs over there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Because I know that they were always a Pennsylvania-based company, but wow, I didn't know that Reebok had stuff going on in New York. That's interesting.
Yeah, the Reebok gym. It was a fitness gym, but at the time it was one of the few like gyms, like high-end gyms that had nice basketball courts in there. You know what I mean? Like you got the Reebok gym. I think you got 14th Street Y. You got I'm trying to think. I don't know. I mean, New York is such a blur right now because of everything that's going on. But there's there's one up on the east side. I think by 59th or 60th or something like that.
The New York Athletic Club.
New York Athletic Club. But there's not a lot of places. You know what I mean? Where you can go in New York and you got a nice, clean, air-conditioned gym, and especially for like high-end teams, professional teams, to go work out and practice. You know what I mean? Without a lot of interference, without people bothering them. So that was like one of those places.
Well, if anything, those type of gyms that you're talking about are definitely in Jersey.
Yeah.
Because because a lot of people from New York City, let's just face it, they're not coming out to Jersey unless there's some type of event going on. But other than that,
right.
they're not coming out. They're not coming out to certain places.
Right.
Like I'd be willing to come out to Patterson or Newark or
Right.
some of the secluded places. But yeah, New York is basically a hub of everything.
Exactly.
So so you did that. When did the Newark East Side opportunity come into play?
That was like maybe 05, I want to say. That was like maybe like 04, between 04 and 05, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what was it? What was it like? Coaching in the training a team like East Side. Like, how good were they back then? And what was the school itself like?
Well, the funny thing was, I'm forever indebted to the coaches, Brian Garvin and Anthony Tavares for even, a lot of coaches are real territorial. They don't want people working with their players, and that always baffles me because I think it's off the top of my head, like some of the great coaches who have embraced me and allowed me to work with their team and haven't been like on top of me micromanaging me. And you know what I mean? And it's ironic. It's usually the better coaches because they're good. They know they're good. And they're like, he's not trying to coach my team. Like, but those of us who are parents, those of us who are good coaches, we know that sometimes we need to hear a different voice, right? Kids, eventually, they're going to tune you out. So sometimes you need to hear a different voice. So, working with those guys, and getting to train them in the off season, teaching them about building their bodies up, watching the joy when they like 1 minute they're benching the bar and next thing you know, it's like 1 plate, 2 plates, you know what I mean? Or, they're doing box jumps and plyometrics and all of a sudden they go from touching the rim to like, I got 5, 10 kids doing 2-handed dunks, you know what I mean? So, and then even like, wearing the tank tops and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got some guns, I got some traps, I got, you know what I mean? Like just watching the self-esteem change, and that's one of the things that I feel like, is huge, especially with inner city kids. A lot of times they have, pent up, unresolved anger issues, whatever. And their creative outlets are always being taken away. But, it's one thing when you see a person who's in shape, that takes a tremendous amount of self-discipline, right? And usually when that person goes through that transformation, that self-discipline permeates into other areas. So for me, it's about training and about basketball, but it was also about giving them some life skills, teaching them about nutrition, teaching them how to take care of their bodies. And it's funny because I see athletes now that I've trained years and years ago who used to come in kicking and screaming, and now I look at them and I'm like, and they look like Hercules, and they're like, man, coach, like I'm so thankful.
Getting me right.
Yeah, thanks for getting me right. And I just laugh sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, you might have won a few more championships if you would listen to me back then, but now you want the beach body. But it's okay as long as you got the message. No, Eastside was a great experience. I love those kids. You know what I mean? Eventually, they would run through a wall for me. Seeing them improve. I still keep in touch with a lot of the kids now. One of my projects is a kid, Corey Chandler. You know what I mean? Who actually started working with him when he was in 8th grade. Actually, ironically, took him to 5-star, put him on the national stage. He kind of, blew up. And so it was just nice, seeing those kids, and even with him, taking them outside of Newark, you know what I mean? And letting them see, like, yo, you're good regionally, but let's see what you do here against, national players. So that was, it was a great experience for him. Something, obviously he'll never forget. But it was a great experience working at Eastside. But it's hard, like, public school, I envy public school sometimes because a lot of times there's a lot of distractions for the kids, and particularly in the inner city, like you have this confluence of just so many elements, whether it's gangs or whether it's, whatever it is, and so the luxury that the private schools have is a lot of times the kids are vested, they have a purpose, they're like, hey, I want to play football, hey, I want to play baseball, basketball, whatever it is. So, or even academically enriched, whatever it is. And you're afforded that opportunity to sort of be myopic and focus on that, and obviously keep your schoolwork up. But in public school, it's just hard because you have, so many, like I said, you got gangs, you got kids who just don't care about school, you got, overstressed teachers. Like it's like, man, you know what I mean? Just trying to make it to 2:30 is, an adventure within itself. And that was really like one of the things that eventually, kind of pushed me over to, with addition to the work that I was doing, why I kind of moved over to St. Pat's, because I realized that I was going to have a deeper impact because those kids, you say if we had workouts at 6 a.m, you know what I mean? They're there. You know what I mean? They don't, some of them come from the same environments, but it's just something about, and I'm not going to make a blanket statement and say everywhere, but in my experience, it just seems that, those private school kids, there's a different level of focus when it comes to, their particular sport.
Right. Because at schools like Eastside, like you mentioned, everything that you just mentioned, like it's tough to get kids to like really, to stay focused. Whereas at a private school, they have every opportunity to succeed, and 99.9% of the time they'll take that.
Exactly. No, absolutely, 1,000%. They know what they're there for. They absolutely know what they're there for. So, and kudos to the public school teachers and coaches, because a lot of them, they're in the building during the day. And if they weren't in the building during the day teaching, you know what I mean? Who knows where some of these kids will be? And
Exactly.
They take the time to not only teach, academics, but also stay after, you know what I mean? Stay until 7, 8 o'clock at night, for games and practices, and trying to keep those kids on a straight and narrow path.
So now let's go into St. Pat's, which is what a lot of people would probably love to hear you talk about. So you were with them for 5 years. Talk about, talk about your times with the Celtics at that little school on Pearl Street in Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Little tiny gym, it's funny. So there was a kid, like I said, Isma Bala, who had tore his ACL the year before and was rehabbing. And so one of the assistant coaches, through a contact, he had heard about me and sort of, you know, they were like, all right, well, let's see what you can do with him. So I basically rehabbed Eves over the summer, got him in shape. He ended up going on that year to win most outstanding player in the TOC in the state championship against Linden. Now, those who know Jersey basketball know that Kevin Boyle and Bob Hurley were like obviously the two premier programs, sort of going back and forth. And there was a point where Kev couldn't quite get over the hump. You know, those St. Anthony teams, scrappy, you know, ugly, you know, 35, 40-point games, you know, and obviously with the horses that Kevin had, you know, that was tough. So after what I did with Eves, I kind of was given access to, you know, working with the rest of the team. And that was really the transformation, because that following year, I mean, we beat Hurley and St. Anthony so bad. I mean, we literally just manhandled them. You know, to the point where everybody was looking like, you know, our guys were looking like grown men, and just, you know, Jeff Robinson dunking all over him, Corey Fisher, you know, slim and chiseled, you know, blowing by everybody. And everyone was like, damn, like, oh, that's, you know, and obviously at 6'5", 230 sitting on the end of the bench, it's kind of hard for me to, you know, kind of be invisible. So everybody's kind of putting two and two together, like, hold up, wait a minute. Like, this is why these guys are all, you know, looking brolic and flying up and down the court. Like, you know, and it was interesting because, you know, every college coach in America will be coming to that little tiny shoebox gym, right? And Kev, you know, to his credit, you know, would literally give me 35, 40 minutes with the kids of, you know, speed and agility, strength and conditioning, all types of work in front of the college coaches. And then he would do something and then the kids would play. And that's when I realized, like, this is why we have kids going to the levels that they're going. This is the difference. And this is why, you know, St. Pat's is St. Pat's and everybody else down here. And everyone used to, oh, recruit. And I was like, listen, you know how many kids want to come to St. Pat's, and Kevin used to have to say no just because it just wasn't room. You know what I mean?
Right. You can't take everybody.
Can't take everybody. And then not only that, like, kudos to those kids, because like I said, to have to work out with me for 35, 40 minutes, like at my speed and my intensity, right? And then, you know, work with KB and then play in front of college coaches, like, everybody ain't cut for that.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody's not cut for that. And so eventually, like I said, everybody started putting two and two together and started noticing. I mean, I think there was one point where I think I had everybody except maybe two kids were dunking. There was one time we were having practice, and literally KB just let the kids all go in the layup line for like an extra 10 because everybody was dunking. And it was like, damn, like 5'10" kids, you know what I mean? Two-handed dunk. Because again, kids start to see changes in their bodies. It's like the light goes off. It's like, oh, so if I train hard and I do all this stuff, like, there's actually going to be a benefit. Like, I'm going to get in the game and I'm going to be in better shape and I'm going to be able to run faster and jump higher and push people around. And like, once I'm able to get that out of somebody, it's kind of like, you know, the sky's the limit, you know, and it really does. I go back to the story I told. Part of what drives me to push people the way that I did is because when that guy was in front of me, I wasn't playing a lot my freshman year in college. That summer, I made it a point to say to myself, yo, next year, I'm coming back in the best shape of my life. And lo and behold, that's exactly what I did. You know what I mean? In college, I would get up and I would run and I would lift weights. I would leave a brick in the door so I could sneak back in the rack at night. Like, I would run to the train station and catch a train to Jersey City, play in the summer league, run back to catch a train, go home, get up the next morning, run to my job. Like, I mean, I was just like, you know, I was just like OD, you know what I mean? And so I know what it's like to be in the best shape of your life and how it opened my game up, because one of my reasons that I was so successful, I mean, obviously I was athletic, but I just took pride in my conditioning. And there's nothing better. I tell people all this time. When you look at your opponent, you can see it in their eyes. You could literally take their soul out when you see that look where it's like, yo, I can't go no more. I can't go no more. I'm too tired. And once you see that look in their face, it's over. You know what I mean? It's like a fight.
Mhm.
You know, if you're in a fight and you look at the guy and you can tell, like, yo, he ain't even trying to put up a fight. And that's when you got to attack. You know what I mean? And I tell people all the time, fatigue makes cowards out of everybody. The minute you get tired, I don't care who you are, the minute you get tired, you become a coward. So you have to prolong that level of fatigue for as long as you can. And those years that I was at St. Pat's, we were by far the best conditioned team. And I used to marvel because I knew the work and the effort that we put in behind the scenes. These teams will come out, you know, puffing their chest, slapping the floor, doing all this. And I just be like, yeah, okay. And it lasts for about 2 minutes. And then we just run them off the court. And I'd be like, I don't know why these teams don't try to slow it down or do something, because physically they're no match for us. You know, they're no match for us at all.
What was it like, the games against St. Anthony's? Like, how did you guys feel when you beat them and when you guys lost to them?
Well, so it was interesting because that year we beat them. It was just like a euphoria because, like I said, we just literally, I'll never forget, it was like a couple minutes left in the game and Kev was like pulling out the subs and, you know, he was gloating. I could see him gloating, but he just kind of gave me this look where, you know, and if you know Kevin, like he's emotional, like in a high strung sense, but he's not always emotional in like a sentimental sense, right? Because he's always got that, you know, exterior. But he just kind of gave me this look like, yeah, man, I appreciate you. You know what I mean? Because like I could tell, like, you know what I mean? Personally, he got over the hump, but the look he gave me was recognizing that, yeah, like I'm glad I brought you on board because, you know, in fact, that was the same year that we went down to Huntington, West Virginia, and played OJ Mayo on national TV and beat them down there.
Oh yeah, 2007.
That's right. That's right.
And you
So
guys went back to back after beating Linden the year before. Is that true? Is that correct?
So what happened? It was unfortunate because we went down there. It was a 9 o'clock game. You know, we beat them down there in overtime. You know, then literally woke up the next morning at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Flew back to Jersey and had a let the kids rest. You know what I mean? And then they had to play Linden at like 12 o'clock on Saturday. It was, emotionally, they just were flat. I mean, not taking away from anything from Linden, right? That was their Super Bowl. That was their Super Bowl. But then obviously when it was time for the TOC, like, care of business.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how was it coaching? How was it working with Corey Fisher and Jeff Robinson?
Great. I had known Corey since probably freshman year. And I remember a guy that I know, I'm sure a lot of people know well, Anton Marchand.
That's the Anton. That's my guy.
Yep. So he basically was like, yo, look out for my guy Corey, stay after him. And so, Corey, I was like, that big brother for Corey, you know what I mean? Making sure he was in the gym, to this day, like, I still train Corey when he comes home in the summer. He still comes to me for nutrition advice. He always joke like, yo, D, I need you to get me like that pre-Villanova, like, yo, you had me right. Like, get me back like that, right? But yeah, Corey would sleep at my house. You know what I mean? It was like, he was like my pet project. You know what I mean? And it's funny watching his growth as a man because, he used to be kicking and screaming, but now, he's a guy who quietly just goes overseas, makes money, you know what I mean? Goes about his business without all the fanfare, you know what I mean? And just, is a consummate professional, is a consummate professional. And just to know that he knows and he gives me that ultimate respect of like, yo, when I need to get in shape, like, I got to come see my guy. So it was great working with him. You know what I mean? It was really great. And watching, like I said, the transformation of his game, the transformation of his body, unlocking certain things in his body where it's like, oh wow, like if I'm in shape and I'm explosive and I can do this and I can do that, it opens up so many other things. So it was really a good experience.
Yeah, man. So then you got to the next generation of St. Pat's players. A couple of years later, which was your last year, and we'll get into that. But then you had guys like Dexter Strickland, who also goes by a new name now.
Baden Jackson, yep.
Baden Jackson, shout outs to him. But he'll always be known as Dexter Strickland. That's his tournament name. So we're gonna go with that. But him, Mike Gilchrist, and a guard that some people may know as Kyrie Irving.
Kyrie Irving, yeah. So interesting story. So there's a guy, formerly Dexter Strickland and Paris Bennett, guys that I first met when they were like in 7th grade. And, I started working with them back then, and Dexter, early on, it's funny, I see him on the gram now with his shirt off and everything. He wasn't about that weight room life before, but in true fashion, like a lot of guys, when they see the results later on, it's like it becomes, part of what they do. But Dexter, super athletic, freakish athlete, quick as a fox, could jump out of the gym. And had a great career at North Carolina, you know what I mean? Definitely had some great experiences at St. Pat's. Like I said, him and Paris, I've known those guys since they were in 7th grade. And like you said, that next sort of generation, I remember just Michael Gilchrist coming. And it was funny because I was at the Jordan game. I was at the Jordan All-American game, and I'm in the gym joking around with Jeff and Corey. And I hear this voice like, yo, D-Train. I'm like, I know that voice, and I turn around, and of all people is Worldwide West. Like, yo, my guy Gilchrist is coming to St. Pat's next year. Like, to get him right. So, when you hear that, it's kind of like, okay, like I got to go back to the lab and work my magic. So it was a pleasure having Mike. Now, interesting, Kyrie. I met Kyrie. Kyrie grew up in West Orange, right? So there's a park in South Orange called the Baird where a lot of the kids would go. So I'll never forget a young Kyrie probably was in like 7th or 8th grade, and I'm just kind of watching him play. And, you could always tell when young kids kind of got that juice and that swagger. And so I just come out with my book and my DVD. My book was called 12 Necessary Steps for Basketball Success. And then my DVD was Basketball Strength, Speed, and Skills. So I self-published both of those, and I was selling them. And I just come from doing a run at the post office, and I stopped by the court, and I had some in my hand, and I actually remember giving them to this kid, Kyrie. Didn't know him from anything. Like I said, he's a 7th, 8th grade kid at this point. And then I started hearing a little bit of buzz about him at Montclair Kimberly. But it's kind of like, like most people, hey, it's Montclair Kimberly, suburban school, Class B, whatever. And then through some people that I knew, I was actually connected with his dad. Kyrie came in the gym a couple of times, worked out with me. And then all of a sudden I look up one day and he's walking in the door and like, no, like, okay. But seeing his game and I mean, what people don't realize, that Kyrie was always a good player, but his ascension, I call it like a 1.5 year ascension, right? It was almost like a comet, because as good as he was, like, you got to understand, as a junior, Kyrie was still deferring to people. And obviously, I mean, we had a loaded team, but I remember, like, he would come to the bench, sit next, and I'd be imploring him, like, yo, Kyrie, come on, man, you got to shoot, bro. You're open, shoot. Like, confident, don't hesitate, Junior year, he won the TOC. But then that summer, he went and played with the Roadrunners, like, he just, I mean, skyrocketed. And then I remember the following year, walking in the gym and seeing Mike Krzyzewski. And I'm like, and all my years at St. Pat's, we've seen plenty of coaches come to the door. I mean, Tom Izzo, who I had the pleasure of going out to work with his team at Michigan State, Boeheim, Evan Calipari, reconnecting with Coach Cal, just seeing a who's who of everybody in there. But, Roy Williams, another one. Obviously Cal is, Coach K is just, that's a little different. You know what I mean? He's got a little glow, because you're like, wait, like, what's he doing up here? And then that's when I knew, like, oh, damn, like, Kyrie he's nice like that. Because, a the last two times Coach K came to Jersey, he came and got Dave Williams. And before that, he came and got Bobby Hurley, who's one of my peers. So it's like when he comes to get a point guard in New Jersey, like, it's for real, for real.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then I remember, I remember it's so funny. It's almost embarrassing because I remember always saying, man, Kai, you gotta stop and pull up at the free throw line. You're not gonna be able to finish over the bigs like that. You gotta get a floater. You gotta do this, do that. And he would always be going in amongst the trees and doing all the crazy English shots and doing all. And I'm like, Kai, that's not gonna work at the next level, bro. That's not gonna work at the next level. And I'd be darned if I don't sit back sometimes and watch him do that same stuff. And as he's kept rising up and it was working, I was like, yo, this guy is like, he's a problem. And then when I saw him play, I saw him get MVP at the Jordan game. Yeah, I was there at the at the game, and I just remember saying to somebody, I was like, that kid's gonna be a problem. And then literally, like, it was Jordan game, he went to Duke, he got hurt early, which was obviously sad. Then when he came back and he played that Michigan State game, I was like, oh no, he's the real deal. Like, he is the real deal, for real.
Yeah, man. Shout outs to Kyrie Irving, man. Just seeing him from where he was in high school to now, like, it's amazing. Like, he's done, stuff with Nike, just like you have. Uncle Drew is one of my favorite comedic movies.
Basketball movies, yeah.
He even tried to do music one time. That song came out good, but I mean, if Kyrie retires, he could do a multitude of other things, including sing, because his voice, that song from the soundtrack to Uncle Drew is really good.
Yeah, and what I love about Kyrie, he gets a lot of flack about, but and I actually despise the term woke, because to me, like, if you're not woke, what are you, right? What's the opposite of woke? It's sleep, right? Mm-hmm. So, to be, a Black athlete and to be socially conscious and socially aware and to read something besides, comic books, but actually read, and search for that knowledge itself, to the average person, they think that's corny or that's not cool. Mm-hmm. But that's something I really admire about Kyrie, is that, if you follow his Instagram and his stories, he drops a lot of gems. He's got a very old soul. And he's very connected to social causes and social issues. He's standing up for a lot of women's rights, the things he did with the WNBA and their salaries, donating money and product and all that. Like, people could say what they want, but I always say to people, like, until you match or exceed what someone else is doing, you can't criticize them. You can't. So shout out to Kyrie for, being a proud Black man and not afraid to show it.
Facts. And in your last year with them, they won the TOC. So you basically have three TOC rings.
3, yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, it was a good experience, like I said, and it actually kind of spoiled me, because I really thought that everybody was, training, and because everyone, like I said, the thing with Kev was everyone's like, oh, he just recruit, blah blah blah. And in my mind, I'm like, yo, you guys don't understand what we're doing here. Mm. Like, and foolishly, I thought that that's what everyone else was doing.
Right.
Unbeknownst to me, most teams, the coach lets them go in March, and he doesn't see him again until Thanksgiving practice. And yeah, they might do some summer league stuff or whatever, but we know you're not really getting better just going up and going to summer league. You know what I mean? And to know that they had to withstand the intensity of me and the intensity of Kevin, right? And even, my signature moment was like when I would look up and all these top 25 coaches I would see the tops of their heads, because they would be writing down everything that I was doing, and they'd be writing down everything that Kevin was doing, and they'd be taking it back to their team. And so that was like, for me, you talk about an ego boost. I'm like, so wait a minute, you telling me these top 5, top 10 teams in the country are learning from me. Like, you know, like, and even and Kev too, like, you know, Kev's playbook, you know what I mean? And that, you know, we're kind of kindred spirits in that we're very like detail oriented, like stickler for details, which not a lot of, you know, people are, you know what I mean? I tweeted something the other day and I basically said something to the effect of, you know, there's a lot of people playing basketball. There's not a lot of people learning how to play basketball. And it's a big difference, you know? You know, so that experience at St. Pat's, like I said, it spoiled me because, yeah, I get it. We had talent, but don't underestimate how hard those kids work and how much we as a coaching staff push them to greatness. You know, those kids put in hard work, a lot of hours and a lot more time than most kids did. And obviously, you know, the results, you know, speak for what they are.
Yeah, man. I could say, as far as the recruiting thing, some like schools with the caliber of St. Pat's or in Kevin Boyle's case right now, Montverde, they don't necessarily have to recruit. You know what I'm saying? Like kids come to them, but everything is at the coach's discretion as to whether they want to take them or not. So that's the big, I think, misconception that's put out there. Yes, the assistant coaches might be at some of the summer leagues or the AAU tournaments, but it's not. I don't think it's necessarily the coaches recruiting. It's more of whether the kids want to go. And like before, they can't take them all.
No, and everybody honestly doesn't want to make that commitment. You know what I mean? There were some kids who came through those halls and had to leave because whether the rigors of what we were asking them, whether the competition and not seeing the minutes, but you know, everybody couldn't cut it. Now, that's not a slight, that's not a knock, right? Everything isn't for everybody. But those misnomers and those misrepresentations that people put out is unfair because it diminishes and minimizes, you know, the real work that people put in. To just say, oh, you just recruit or whatever. But like, no, if you have a good product, you know, people are going to want to be drawn to that. And those of us like myself, who was fortunate to have great colleges, great coaches throughout high school, throughout college, know the value of that. You know, there's a difference when, you know, your basketball coach is, you know, somebody who happens to be an English teacher and he's just looking for a stipend versus the high school coach who's like, no, my job is I'm responsible for these young men. I got to groom them as players. I got to groom them as young men. And if they have an opportunity to chase a dream, then it's up to me to help try to foster and fulfill that as much as possible. And, you know, I talk to parents a lot and they always sort of like, after the fact, they kind of complain about what's going on at their school. And I always just ask them, like, before you enrolled in that school, did you look at the history? Did you look at the lineage? Did you ask the coach, hey, you know, do you have relationships with college coaches? You know, what players have come through here, right? Because let's be honest, that's how a lot of kids will get recruited because college coaches are smart. They go to places that produce high-level talent. Exactly. And they say, hey, who you got? Hey, who's in the pipeline? Tell me about some of the young kids. And they might not get somebody this year. They might not get, but just to know that they're continuing to foster that relationship. And so at any time, they're not late to the table when somebody does pop off. Right. You know, and I think that's the difference with you know, this whole grassroots basketball thing is that you have to do the legwork. And a lot of it is about building and maintaining relationships. And I take great pride in that. I could walk in a lot of gyms and, you know, it's funny, I'm with kids now, I'm with my son's team and, you know, they'll see people come up to me from NBA guys to other people and they'll just be like, yeah, how do you know everybody? How does everybody know you? Like, how come everywhere we go, like somebody always comes up to you and starts talking to you? Like, how do you know so many people? And I'm like, you know, relationships are important. You have to build and maintain relationships. You just never know, you know, when that person's going to need you or when, you know, you might need them. So relationships go a long way.
Well said. So, one person I forgot to mention, Derek Character. What was it like working with him?
DC, I only got to work with him a little bit before he got shipped off to prep school. But I definitely, like, he's one kid I wish I would have had more time with. I mean, it's crazy to know. I actually, what's funny is I was at Eastside when Scotch Plains had Derek Character and Lance Thomas, and an Eastside team beat Derek and Lance. Could you imagine in high school Derek Character and Lance Thomas on the same team?
Mm.
That's what they had at Scotch Plains. And you know who else is from Scotch Plains? All the Gibbs boys. So they could have had a team of Ashton Gibbs, Lance Thomas, and Derek Carrick. They're all from the same town.
That's crazy.
Like, who was that coach that couldn't keep them there? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know? So yeah, I had DC for a little bit. You know, he was a good kid though. He was a good kid. A lot of pressure though. A lot of pressure. I mean, that kid was that size since he was in 8th grade.
Yeah. I even heard something about how he liked some, I think, a Beanie Baby toy or something like that.
Speaking of toys, I'll tell you a funny story about 5-Star that I can still tease him to this day. Is Michael Beasley, and so at 5-Star, my bunk was Michael Beasley, Nolan Smith, Gerald Henderson, Wayne Ellington, Corey Chandler, Earl Clark, another Jersey kid, right? These kids were all in my bunk. So Nolan and Mike Beasley used to walk around with little SpongeBob knapsacks, and like little sleeping things. So crazy. But yeah, like to see those kids, you know what I mean? Like from where they were to where they went. It's just like it's my 6 degrees of basketball separation is crazy.
So after St. Pat's, you left in 2009, and when did the Nike and Jordan brand thing come about? Like, what year exactly? Was this before St. Pat's?
It was kind of like around the same time.
Okay.
I had started with Nike, I think in like 06. And then Jordan, like I said, I met the guy from Jordan down at the Jordan's birthday party. We started talking. He needed some content for the website, so I provided him content for the website. Then they did this worldwide Breakfast Club tour where I got to work alongside Tim Grover. Went to 12 cities, and what's crazy now is, you know, on those 12 city tours, like I know there's a bunch of NBA players that came to those like one-day Jordan camps, because I mean we would go to the cities and I would do sessions, like I would do 100 kids in the morning from like 9 to 12, and then I would do like 100 kids from like 1 to 3. Like I'm talking in the middle of the South in the summer in the heat. And at first, like when it was just starting out, I did it by myself, right? Then eventually they gave me the budget to hire some trainers, and I had some other trainers that, you know, I worked with, but I had to cut my teeth training 100 kids and keeping 100 kids moving, hot sun. You know what I mean? So it's like when you talk about paying your dues and grinding, and then, oh, by the way, after I'd be out in the sun training, like we would get in a trailer and drive to the next city, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was a grind. But one of the things I remember most is Tim Grover came to the first one, and of course, you know, Tim is like the GOAT, and I'm like nervous, you know. He just kind of like afterwards, like he's just like, yo, man, like you got it, bro. He's like, if you weren't good, you know, you wouldn't be here. You know what I mean? People did their homework, they see you, you know what I mean? But you know, you know, it's one thing when you're with your familiar surroundings, but when you're, you know, I'm in Chicago, I don't know anybody, I'm training these kids for the first time, like, you know, it was crazy. And just to get his blessing to be like, yeah, you know your stuff, you know, that was really like a big confidence booster for me. And then doing a lot of stuff in New York. I mean, obviously when we, you know, the Mazrick Gym, I mean, you know, down the Lower East Side, and just all the influencers. I mean, at one point I was training the rapper Stalin, right? Like Go figure. You know what I mean? In addition to all the teams that used to come through there, and I mean, it's just I couldn't even sit here and name all the people that I've had the fortune of working with and training. I mean, WNBA players like Epiphany Prince and Tina Charles. I mean, when Epiphany was going to Rutgers, she stopped by my house. I gave her like a 50-inch TV. Imagine being in college with a 50-inch TV, right? That's the first time I met, because Anton introduced me to Epiphany, right? And was like, in the summertime, you're going to work with D-Train. And that's how that relationship started.
Well, the least the NCAA can't do anything to you now when it comes to that TV.
The statute of limitations is up. So
Yeah.
She stopped by my house. I gave her a 60-inch TV. But now she can buy all the 60-inch TVs she wants. But yeah, no, that Anton was the one who made that connection and was like, yo, you're gonna get with D-Train this summer, and been training her ever since.
So name some of the NBA players that you've worked with outside of Kyrie Irving.
Oh man, I mean,
you could just give me a few names.
I mean, obviously Kyrie was there, Mike Gilchrist was there. I remember what's crazy is I remember Tiny Morton basically calling me over to Lincoln to work with. He was frustrated, his guys were dogging it, whatever. And he called me over and was like, yo, I need you to come over for a week and work with my guys, right? And one of those kids happened to be Lance Stevenson, 8th grader, going into 9th grade, built like a grown man. And I just remember I'm saying to myself, like, and to go back to my point, guys like Tiny, here's a guy who, producing pros, winning championship after championship, but he respects what I do so much that he's like, yo, I need your voice. I need you to get through to these guys, and not feeling insecure about it, right? Not feeling any type of way. And what's interesting, so I work with Lance. I work with Lance and the whole Lincoln team for about a week. And I think that summer or the following summer, I worked with I had Sebastian Telfair for a couple of summers. And then ironically, a few more years later, Tiny's like, I got another one. And
Isaiah Whitehead.
So I'm looking at Isaiah when he's in like 9th grade, and Tiny's bringing Lance over to Jersey to work out with me. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, damn, this is like history repeating itself. It's just, it's unbelievable. So I just, there's so many people, like I said, all those cities that we went to, you know what I mean, on the Jordan tour, all the stuff I've done in New York and New Jersey, I mean, I'd just be here all day naming people, you know what I mean? And even like kids now that, like, I have kids come up to me now that, you don't remember me, or their parents will come up and be like, oh, you don't remember me, my son, my daughter, whatever. It's not to be rude or pompous or arrogant, it's just that I've trained so many people, you know what I mean, that so somehow, some way, whether it's in Jersey, whether it's out across the world, whether it's, in the Nike gym, wherever, like, the numbers are just ridiculous. Sometimes I sit back and I just think like, damn, I've trained so many people, but it's, it's a good feeling because I know that I've impacted, people in a positive way. So it really does make me feel good.
So 2010, you got to work in the World Basketball Festival.
Oh man, what a moment, right? What a moment. Yeah, I can tell people I got to stand on the court with Michael Jordan at the same time. Go look it up. It's on YouTube when Michael Jordan came to Rutgers Park, right? And then I'm sitting there and I'm working with Chris Paul and Dwayne Wade and Melo. Like, I mean, it was just, and it's funny you bring that up because, I mean, championships and everything is great, right? High school, college. But I mean, come on, like, you stand on the court, on the Rutgers court, on a wooden court, right? And MJ comes out, like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, you talk about a moment, that's a moment, that is a moment. That is definitely a moment for sure. So that World Basketball Festival, that was fun times for sure.
Man. So with all the success that you've had with high schoolers and individual NBA players and college guys, like, or girls, why is it that, you know, you never chose to go the college or pro route?
I mean, it's tough. You know, there's a lot of people gunning for those jobs. You know, I think one of the challenges, you know, outside of like the Power Five conferences, you know, every school doesn't value, you know, training the way that I think that they should. Um, you know, so I just, for whatever reason, there were different times where just the situation just, you know, I didn't feel like giving up what I had built, you know, could be sort of just extinguished by something that I didn't feel would give me the same reward or benefit as what I was already doing. Now, had somebody made me an offer that was like, hey, I can say goodbye and forget about all those other relationships, and I would have done that. But a lot of times I just found situations where it was like people wanted to get a lot out of me for a little bit, and I wasn't willing to exchange that, you know, and also, you know, curtail my time and then curtail my ability as an entrepreneur to, you know, pursue unlimited opportunities.
Right.
You know, that sometimes those jobs are good, but sometimes those jobs are limiting because, again, you're working for somebody else and, you know, you have to follow what it is they want. And the last thing I would want is, you know, I think that the challenge with the NCAA for me is because I had so many different relationships, and every year it just seemed like the bar was changing. You know what I mean? Like there was one point where I could and I was getting paid by college programs to legitimately work out their players, right? And, you know, a college coach could, you know, pay me in the summer to, you know, work their kids out. Or you know, camps. Like there used to be a thing where, hey, come speak at camp. I'll pay you to come speak at camp. Like all that stuff with all the changes, it's like it was just constantly a moving target. And I was like, you know what? Rather than hitch my wagon to that, let me just keep building what I've already built, you know, and you know, having the opportunity to travel to China and do all these different things. Had I decided to, you know, be in-house, I wouldn't have gotten those same opportunities. You
Mm.
know, I couldn't have worked for Nike if I was working for a college, you know. I couldn't have done the Jordan tour if I was working for a college. I couldn't, you know, have a gym with, you know, 50 kids. Like every summer, Anton and I used to organize this workout in Brooklyn with like all the top, you know, college kids who were home from the summer. And I literally would just donate my time for those 2 weeks, right before they went back to school to kind of give them a head start so that when they went back to school that they were in tip-top shape, you know. And I mean, we would have 40, 50 kids in there. We do it at Bishop Ford, we do it at Pratt. And every year it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And again, if I was under the auspices of, you know, an institution, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to do that.
There's no freedom in work. Like when you're working with a school, like, and that's very true. Because I was a manager at a Division I school for 3 years, so I know, like, working with the NCAA, your things are very, very limited. You know, it's a lot of red tape around a lot of things. So,
Absolutely.
but fortunately, I was just a manager, and I wasn't, I was like, let's say, like somebody in my capacity I'm a member of the press, so there's no rules against that. But if you're a scout, you definitely can't be a part of a program either. So
Right.
for all you guys that want to be involved with um a college program and you're doing other things, just know that there's going to be a lot of red tape, and more than likely, you're going to have to give up one thing to be involved with a program.
Yeah.
That's just the
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah, they don't really embrace the entrepreneurial spirit.
At all.
And so, and not only that, like, you know, if I'm working at school X and I have relationships with players at school Y and they want to come work out with me, well, yeah, come work out with me. If I have a relationship with an agent who sends me his players in the summertime and pays me to work his players out in the summertime, that's a conflict of interest. So those are all the things that you have to weigh. And for me, I just felt like the blessings that I was getting and the opportunities I was getting, um, they were just too much to pass up. You know, if I was working at an institution, I couldn't go spend a month in China, you know, doing the Nike tour. Wouldn't have happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? I couldn't have done the Breakfast Club with Jordan going across the country if I was working for an institution. They wouldn't allow it. So I just felt like the rewards and my opportunities, far outweighed just sort of being limited or being pigeonholed, in one place.
Freedom is key.
Freedom, absolutely, for sure.
Nah, but so talk about, there's a lot of people that say that they're trainers out there, and your resume speaks for itself. Like, what are some things like what's D-Train's philosophy to being a trainer, and what would you tell a lot of young people that would love to get into the business that you've gotten into?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. First and foremost, as accomplished as I was as a player, right? I still, before I got into training, I went and got certified. I went and became a certified strength and conditioning specialist. I took the test. I wasn't a kinesiology major or exercise science major in college. So I actually took the time and literally took a crash course almost as if I was going to medical school, right? Learning the body, learning biology, learning kinesiology, learning all the planes of movement. I literally immersed myself in that stuff and learned it. I see so many guys, in the gym doing cone drill, doing this, that, but they couldn't tell you anything about planes of movement. They can't tell you anything about injury prevention. They can't tell you anything about building up your body. It's just, people think they can just grab a bag of balls and some cones and just, have people doing drills. I mean, that's fine. And if people pay you for that, I'm not here to knock anybody's hustle. But first and foremost, that's what I did. You know what I mean? That was the first thing that I did was I'm going to go get certified. So, it's funny because that same certification allowed me to, pursue certain opportunities because, again, when you're dealing with certain business entities, they're going to ask like, hey, you have this certification, are you insured, this, that, and the third. So when the time way back in the day when I was allowed to work with universities as sort of a consultant, right? If I didn't have that stuff, I probably wouldn't have been able to pursue those opportunities. So that's the first thing. The other thing, because it's become such a sort of hybrid thing now, right? Because I was focused on basketball specific strength, speed, and skills, right? Because my philosophy was you got to build up your body first and get yourself in shape so that when we get out on the court, I'll never forget, I used to beg Coach Van Gundy to work me out. And I used to beg him and beg him and beg him. And finally, one day he took me out on the court and worked me out. Man, I was dead in 5 minutes because he was forcing me to go do drills by myself at game speed, in and out, layup, get the rebound, full speed dribble to half court. Same thing, make 5 in a row. You know what I mean? If you work out like that, so that's why when people are talking about they're in the gym 2 and 3 hours, I'm like, you ain't going hard if you're in the gym 2 or 3 hours. If you're going hard, you in there for an hour, hour and a half, and you're done. It's very focused and it's very specific. The other thing I would say is you got to study. You know what I mean? The internet has kind of made it cliff notes or cheat sheet, right? Because people I call them copy and paste trainers because they'll see a drill that somebody's doing,
right?
And it's everybody's doing the same 5 drills because they saw them. But if you've ever been in an NBA practice, if you've ever been in a high-level workout, if you've ever been in a college, there's got to be a progression. And I used to laugh because when I first started, I used to want to hoard all my drills and all my workouts, right? I want nobody to see what I'm doing. I don't know what I would see them doing. Because I would get these coaches who would come and they wouldn't bring players. They come to the workout and I'd be looking like, yo, why are you coming to my gym and not bringing any players? Well, they were sitting in the corner writing out the whole workout. And at first I used to be really tight about it. Then I would laugh because I was like, what they don't realize is they don't have the progression. This is the basic part of the drill. But then once they learn this part, there's a progression and a progression. And you constantly have to challenge people with the drills and exercises. Otherwise, it's going to get stale. And kids and players aren't stupid. They're going to know if you're just copying some stuff you saw, or every time they come to you, it's damn, he got some different ish with him this time. damn, like, wait, you know what I mean? I mean, even to this day, it's funny. I have Epiphany tell me, like, yeah, D, like, you know, I tried to get such and such, but they said they heard about your workout. So they, you know, they ain't really trying to, you know. So my thing, and I would joke with her and I would joke with Corey, because I would always tell them, I'd be like, I've known you guys for a long time, but I just sat here and goofed around with you and turned around and expected you to pay me. Like, how could I look at myself in the mirror? Like, I'm evaluating myself on your performance, on the condition of your body. Like, I'm not in here so people can see us on social media. Like, I'm here because I'm here to bust your ass, because you're my walking billboard. You're my walking testament. So I think a lot of times people now, like, I get social media, I get it, the popularity, the proliferation of followers and all that, I get it. But my thing is, you know, is it style or is it substance? You know what I mean? Like, what is it that you're promoting? You know, and even from a just from a holistic standpoint, like as a trainer, like I see guys drinking and smoking and they're trainers, and I'm like, like
They're like the
how
worst examples.
yeah, like you know what I mean? Like what example are you setting? You know what I mean? Like that just I don't understand that. I'm not knocking anybody, but I'm just saying, like, I just think it's really important to embody what you live. You know what I mean? And like be a living example of what it is that you're doing. And I say to people, like, if you're gonna do this, like, do it from a pure place. Don't do it from a clout chasing standpoint. Don't do it from a, you know, oh, I just want to do this to make money and hustle, and I'm gonna just sit under here and rebound and, you know, train these rich kids and collect money. I mean, you could do that. You could do that. It's capitalism. It's a free country, you know. But I just think, you know, I always just took great pride in what it is I was doing, trying to be the best, trying to learn from the best, trying to, you know, be meticulous about how I organize. Like, there's nothing worse than I watch, you know, like with my son, I watch sometimes he'll go to certain practices or workouts, and I'll just sit back and I'll just see, like, it's not organized. You know what I mean? There's like I learned from Hubie Brown a long time ago. Like, if you ever see me, like, I usually have a note or a sheet of paper or a printout or something where I write down, like, all right, we're doing this for 5 minutes, we're doing this. Like, same like when you go to college, right? Or the pros, they hand you a sheet and it has a minute by minute run up show of what you're doing. You know, I also learned that when I worked at Nike, because I would do these workouts and they're like, all right, you got X amount of time. And I would be like, okay, they give me 30 minutes. I got to try to showcase as much different stuff as I can in those 30 minutes. So I got to literally be looking at my watch, or I got to have a clock, and we got to cover all these topics. And also, people have a short attention span. So you got to give them something quick and then move on. Give them something quick, and then you got to give them a bunch of stuff. And they got to know that, yo, every time I come, we're gonna do something different. We don't do the same stuff all the time. Like, yeah, there's some basic stuff that we do, but you've always got to challenge them. You've always got to have a progression and a next level to take them to. Otherwise, they're just gonna get bored, and then they're gonna look for someone else that's gonna give them a shortcut. And I always have people come back to me, because it's funny, because they'll go somewhere for free, right? And it just won't be the same. You know what I mean? And I think the proliferation of YouTube and social media has made it where people, like, think free is better. And I'm like, get
Not
what you
always
pay for.
better.
Not always better, you know, and it's down to the point now where you have a lot of people who just feel like they're entitled, like they don't have to pay for training, you know. And then you know, obviously it's on a much different scale, but people are marveling at LeBron at 35 and you're 17. But I'm like, first of all, 35 is not that old. Second of all, the man invests millions of dollars a year in his body. They're like, well, he's got whatever. I was like, yeah, but take that percentage of what he's spending on his body compared to what he makes, and do the same thing for yourself. So if that's 7% of his income, right? 7 to 10%, whatever it is, I don't know. Are you, if you're a pro or an aspiring pro athlete, right? Are you taking 7 to 10% of your income and investing in your body and in your nutrition so that you can maintain and maximize so that you can play for 17 years? No, that's what they need to be asking.
Yeah, a lot of players aren't doing that, and they're putting their money into millions of other things.
I have more guys that come to the gym in Gucci belts and J's and be like, yo, D, you know, I ain't got it. Yo, can you give me a discount? And I'm just like, bruh, like,
They're athletes. That's the
yeah.
crazy thing about it.
And then you go on their stories and it's like, you know, they at the hookah bar, you know, they got the overpriced liquor, you know, and you're just like, so
That's
you just
sad.
gonna floss on the gram, but then you come in the gym and you broke and you want a freebie. Like, come on, bro. How does that work? You know? So
That's
it's
sad.
crazy. Yeah.
So this is one of the questions that I love to ask my guests before I lead up to the final question. If you could go back to, say, 1989, what would you tell Daryl at 18, 19 as a freshman at Rutgers? Before
Actually,
training.
so actually, I would go to I would actually, if I could go back in time, I would go back to probably overseas.
Okay.
I think what happened was, you know, I had, you know, moderate success. I mean, I had fun in college, right? I had fun on and off the court, right? Um, but I went overseas and I think I got a little discouraged by the business of basketball. And I would probably tell my younger self to be a little more stick-to-itive. And like I would come home in the summer, right? God rest his soul, but I was giving Anthony Mason 30 points at the Jersey Shore League, right? And he's guarding me, like legit guarding me, you know. And I'm playing summer league with Anthony Mason and Rod Strickland and Mark Jackson, all these guys, you know, Mahmoud, you know, down at the Jersey Shore. And I'm like, you know, but and in my mind I'm saying like, oh, I'm doing this in summer league, but you know, ain't no contract here. You know what I mean? Then you go overseas, you're fighting for your money, you're doing this, you're doing that. But then you see these other stories, right, of these guys, these John Starks and these other people who like, you know, they just keep trying, keep knocking on doors, keep knocking on doors. I think because I didn't get it right away, I think I kind of gave up a little too soon, right? Because I would like in the summer, like I'm wearing a suit 9 to 5, but in the summer, like I can't wait to get off work and all these dudes are coming home and I'm like, yo, all these tournaments, I'm like, yo, I'm going at the net. Pro-Am, like I'm going at the net. But I'm not, you know, it's not getting me closer to, you know, where I want to be. And I think I probably gave up a little too soon, which I think is probably why now I push people the way that I do, because I don't want them to give up on their dreams. And I want them, if they really want it, right? You know, and even like, it's funny, I was talking to one of my college teammates. He was asking me about my son, and because I, you know, we send videos of our kids and talk and whatever. And he said, you know, the thing I admire about you is you're teaching your son all the things that you didn't do well until you got to college. You're teaching him now. So you're not teaching him, you're not going to have him just rely on the freakish athleticism that you had. You're teaching him the high level fundamentals now so that if he does get that freakish athleticism, he'll have the fundamentals, because I was just such a freak athlete, but I didn't really learn the game of basketball until I got to college, you know. So that's, if I could go back, that's what I would change. You know, I would, I'd be a little more focused and I would not give up so easily.
Indeed. So final question. What's next in the future for Daryl D. Train Smith and D. Train?
Well, I got a little one who's 11. So, as I've been told by a lot of people, man, all these people that you trained and help get in the pros and help get into college, and I know your son, you know, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, he loves basketball. I think you know, I still have a passion for helping people and helping young people and training. I do. So I think I'm going to continue to do that. But now I kind of have an obligation to help him sort of, you know, get on the launch pad. And once the nose of the plane, I see it start to, you know, point up, then I can sort of, you know, fall back a little bit. So that's kind of, where my focus is right now, is sort of on the younger demographic. I mean, I still have my, elite high school and college players that I work with. But now I got a little super client that I'm trying to, trying to bring along. So we'll see how that goes.
D, thank you for coming on to share your testimonial, and I wish you and D Train and little Dyson nothing but the best moving forward.
I appreciate it, man. We'll see. We'll have to get you back to the next open run.
Indeed. Well, everybody, this is episode 71 of Hoops Talk with Dave's Joint. For those that support D Train, for those of you from Worcester Academy, Rutgers, and definitely New Jersey, and people that were his clients at the Patrick School in Newark East Side, definitely check this interview out on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV. Stay blessed, stay safe. Peace.
Peace.